Hi and welcome or welcome back to The Books Are Everywhere. Please ignore the situation that's going on behind me with all of this mess and boxes. We are currently in the process of packing to move, so please ignore all of that. But anyway, I am here with my June wrap up. And it's the last day of June. I have read 15 books in June, which I'm pretty happy with. It's definitely more than I've read in any other months this year. I think I've pretty much been averaging around 10 or 11. It's still not like my best in comparison to last year, but I'm still pretty happy with 15. I've read a lot this month and I feel like I have read a lot this month, which has been greatly helped by me and Courtney going on our reading retreat. June does tend to be a big month for me in general because of Whatever You Want-a-thon. However, sadly that didn't happen this year, but I still managed to read quite a lot, so I'm going to take you through everything I read now. I also did read a few series or start a few series, which I'm pretty happy with how I tackled that. I have a bad habit of starting series and never finishing them, but I actually read an entire series and 2 books from another series in this month, so pretty happy with that. So we'll be discussing the series more as a whole series rather than book by book. And to start that off, I read the 2 books from one series I read was These Broken Stars and This Shattered World by Amy Kaufman and Megan Spooner. This one is interesting. I have been hesitant to read these for a long time because I just wasn't sure how I would find them. I love the Illuminae, like the first book in the Illuminae files, so much, and then I just found that Gemina and Obsidio just kind of repeated what happened in Illuminae but with different characters, and I was a little hesitant going into this series that it would be the same. However, this is co-written with a different author, so I thought I'd give it a go. This is a sci-fi romance series. Each of the books do follow different characters and they are kind of similar, like they're following different characters, and this one is following I can't even remember their names, Lilac and Tava, who kind of crash land on a planet and they have to kind of survive. And then the second one is following Lee and Flynn, although I feel like they have different names throughout the book, to be honest, like because they're like captains or whatever. Sometimes they use their titles and sometimes they don't. One of them is like a rebel and one of them is a soldier, and both of them are like sci-fi kind of romance books. I do have the last one in the series to read and I do want to read that in July. That is my plan, so I would like to finish this series. That's the wrong way around, but yeah, so I read both of these. I enjoyed the first one more than the second one. The second one honestly only got 2 stars I think from me. The first one, I'm just having a look, got 3 stars, so neither of them were amazing. I found with both of these that I was just thrown into the story, like nothing felt like it was explained, and it took me like 50 to 100 pages to feel like I understood what was going on. With this one, after that like 100-page mark, it felt like it fell into a steady rhythm and was very easy to follow the story. I never really felt that with this one. I never really felt like it just calmed down and got to a day-to-day level like this one did, which is why this one was only 2 stars, this one was 3 stars. It was enjoyable enough to read and I didn't dislike the characters. I just don't really have anything to sing the praises of these books, like this series as a whole. I am going to give the last one a go because I think I will hopefully like it, not dislike it. We will see. I wouldn't say that I particularly like, maybe I gave this one 2.5 stars. Yeah, I gave this one 2.5 stars. 2 feels like it's a bit harsh. Because I wouldn't say I dislike them particularly. There's just nothing really that impressive about them to me. I feel like I'm being really brutal. But yeah, I did enjoy this one more And I would say if you did want to read any of these, then just read the first one. But I was a little disappointed going into this one to find out that it was different characters, because I did know that we were going to kind of be repeating the same plot line again, but with different characters. It was quite different in terms of what was happening to the characters. You're in the same world and the characters from this book do appear in it, but they did have quite a different plot line. So hopefully that's going to be the same with book 3 as well, but I think it's probably still going to be quite predictable. Then I read the entire Good Girl's Guide to Murder series by Holly Jackson. I had the first one in this physical paperback format, however I listened to all of these on audio and they were brilliant on audio. Like, I would highly recommend listening to this series on audio, because in this book it is a lot of like transcripts and phone calls, and they are recorded in the audiobook so well. You can hear the dial tones, you can hear background noise on the calls, like things like that. It's done like incredibly well. I thought the whole series was just brilliant. I rated this one 4.5 stars, and then I rated the second one, Good Girl Bad Blood, 4 stars, and As Good as Dead 3.5 stars. They were really compelling books, and I feel like I haven't said what this is about yet, but this is following Pip, who is 15 years old, I think. She is in her last year of high school in the UK, and she's doing this like last year of high school, not an exam, but like a project that runs throughout the whole of the summer or the whole year. And she can focus on anything she wants, and she decides to investigate a closed case murder that happened in her town 5 years previously. She's trying to basically prove the innocence of this person who was convicted at the time. So that's what the first book is about. The other 2 books follow other cases that Pip is looking into, and I definitely think this one is the strongest, and once you get over the kind of idea of the book and how they're formatted, the other 2 are slightly less impressive. The last one is insane. I feel like when it came out, a few people were saying like how wild it was and it was quite unbelievable and out there, which I think is fair to say. I didn't find it as maybe shocking as other people. I just found with the last book, As Good as Dead, that I knew who the killer was so early on in the book, and it was so obvious to me because it felt like it was just being danced around and that person was not being mentioned as a like possible killer. There's a word for that, can't remember the name. But because that person was just avoided and not mentioned, it felt so obvious to me that it was them. But the other 2, I definitely found it harder to guess who the killer was. I did guess it in this one, or at least I had an inkling about part of what was going on. With the second one, I don't think I had an inkling at all, really. And then with the third one, I knew exactly what was happening. So definitely this one was the most impressive, and it was absolutely brilliant. But I would recommend the series as a whole. I thought it was really well done, especially on audio. I then read The Island Home by Libby Page, which I also listened to on audiobook, and this one follows a single mom called Lorna and her daughter, who is called Ella, who have lived on the Isle of Dogs in London for years, basically Ella's whole life. And Lorna ran away from home at the age of I think 16 or 18 and went to live in London. Previously to that, she lived on a small island called the Isle of Kip, which is off the coast of Scotland, and she ran away from home basically because she had not a great childhood and didn't have a great relationship with her parents. Her parents have now died, and she is going back to the island for the first time since she left when she was 18. And this is following her journey to this island and her trying to rekindle any kind of relationship with her brother and her brother's family. It's told in a dual perspective between Lorna and her sister-in-law, so her brother's wife, Alice, who has lived on the island for a while and wasn't native to the island. So it was interesting getting those 2 perspectives. I really like this book. It was so predictable but also really heartwarming and lovely. I love Libby Page. They're so comforting and kind of pull on the heartstrings, and I didn't know what was going on most of the time. I feel like it was incredibly predictable in places, but if that's what you know going into it and that's what you kind of expect, I feel like you're going to really enjoy this one. I really enjoyed it, and I love listening to it while I was driving around Scotland as well. It was the perfect time to listen to it, and it was so enjoyable. Livy Page is the author of The Lido, which is like one of my favourite books. I loved that book. When I read it back in 2020, it was just exactly what I needed at the time, and I've honestly really enjoyed all of her books since that I've read, and I just have her newest release, which I haven't read yet, which I think is called The Vintage Shop of Second Chances, which I will read at some point. But The Island Home was a great addition to her writing, and I did really enjoy it, so I gave that one 4 out of 5 stars. I then read Like a Curse by Elle McNichol, and this is, now we're getting into the books that me and Courtney Buddy read while we were on holiday, and this is the sequel to Like a Charm by Elle McNichol, which is set in Edinburgh, so we wanted to read this while we're in Scotland. Turns out this one goes north of Edinburgh to Loch Ness, and we were staying above Loch Ness, about an hour's north of Loch Ness. So this is following Rayma Knox, who, I don't want to say too much about this book because you need to read Like a Charm before you read Like a Curse. But the first book is following Rayma, who is living in Edinburgh at the time, and this city is full of magical creatures that only she can see, and she's pulled into this world of secrets and spells. She wants to discover the truth behind these hidden folk that she can see, and she's had this warning from her grandmother that is, beware the sirens. She's plunged into this adventure, and she's about to learn there's more to her powers than she ever imagined. So this is following Rayma again, but with more of her family involved and people around her, and she's on the banks of Loch Ness instead of in Edinburgh. They do also feature Edinburgh in this book though, which was really lovely. Again, it was great to read this while we were in the wilds of Scotland, and we did drive past Loch Ness as well on our way back down to Glasgow before we came home, so it was a lovely time to read it. I feel like this is definitely, I don't know how to say this because I love Elle McNichol's writing so much, but I think this was probably her least impressive so far for me. Me and Courtney both said that because we read Show Us Who You Are first, that's the one we hold in the highest regard because it just impressed us so much. We then read A Kind of Spark, which is her first book, and we both love that as well, but I don't think it quite got 5 stars, or at least it didn't have the same kind of wow factor as Show Us Who You Are. Then this is the other 2 books that she's written, so Like a Charm and Like a Curse, and I think at this point, because we're quite familiar with her writing, it's harder to be impressed by it. That feels so horrible to say, but I don't know how else to word it, how I'm feeling. But with this one, I just found that I didn't enjoy it quite as much because it felt a little bit less grounded. It was more fantasy. That's not an issue, that's just personally how I feel. I felt like I enjoyed Show Us Who You Are more and A Kind of Spark more, which feel like they are more grounded in the real world and with real experiences, and I just personally enjoyed those more. I did still enjoy this one a lot, and I really liked that we read it while we were in Scotland. I still rated this one 4 stars. I did really enjoy it, it's just not my favourite Elle McNichol book. I then read The Sad Ghost Club Volume 3 by Lisa Meddings, and this is the 3rd volume in this series, which is just following these ghosts who become friends, and each of them are focusing on different kind of mental health issues, and it's so lovely because as these books go on, we follow more and more ghosts and more that are in this group. So in the first book, our main ghost, who I can't remember the names of any of these ghosts right now, but the first one we meet, Socks. It's helpful that that was on the very first page of this book because I could not remember it at all. But the first one we follow is Socks, and it's following Socks as they meet this other ghost and who is going through this situation that's similar to them when they feel very alone. In the second book, they kind of find more people and form the Sad Ghost Club, and this one is following that group of friends and ghosts as they go through different kind of issues of mental health issues. It's incredibly comforting, just so heartwarming. I follow this account on Twitter and Instagram, and it's just so lovely to see them on my feed, and I just find this art style just, it's so simple, it's so easy to read, and coming back to this story is just like being wrapped in a warm blanket. It's just so comforting and so lovely, and I just really enjoyed it. So I rated this one 4.5 stars. It's just so lovely. We then read Girls Like Girls by Hayley Kiyoko, and this one is based on the song Girls Like Girls by Hayley Kiyoko. So it says, trailblazing pop star, writer and director, and it was so interesting to read this book. It was crazy. So this one is following exactly the story of the music video for Girls Like Girls and the song. Set in summer, it's following a 17-year-old girl called Coley who has been forced to move to a town in the middle of nowhere in Oregon to live with her dad after she loses her mother, and then she meets a girl called Sonia. And she meets this like friendship group as well. It's interesting. It was very heavy on the alcohol and drug use, which I think is reflected from the music video. But it definitely feels like there's a lot in here for a YA book, for a teen book. But this one was interesting. I don't know how to explain this book because, like me and Courtney were saying, if we were going off the music video, the fact that this is like made off the music video and that has the storyline of the music video, it would be 5 stars, because that music video and that song holds a special place in both of our hearts, and we've loved that song for a very long time. And I remember listening to that song probably when it came out in 2015, although both me and Courtney said it feels like it's been longer and we found it after it came out. In reality, we probably listened to it when it came out, and I've watched that music video a lot. Like, I remember when I used to listen to music on YouTube a lot more, which I still do, by the way. I would have that music video on when I was listening to it, so it was so interesting to have this be based off that, but it definitely felt like a love story to the video and to the song, which we've recently also found out, I think in the acknowledgements, Hayley kind of talks about it, that she directed that video as well, and it was made on quite a shoestring budget and they didn't expect the song to blow up when it did, which is really interesting to know. However, I didn't feel like the writing was that great. I just felt like this is so harsh and I don't know how to say it not sounding really harsh, but it felt like it had been really edited to me, and it felt like Hayley wasn't a writer originally. And I think, as we said, this is a love letter to the video and to the song, and Hayley is an incredibly talented singer, songwriter, director. It felt like this was a passion project, and it felt like it had been edited quite a lot, and for me, I was pulled out of the story because of that. Once I got into it, it was very easy to read and I did enjoy it. However, I think me and Courtney also said that some of it obviously came from the video, straight from the video. Some of it was added on top of what we could see in the video, and I think what was chosen to be in the book didn't always feel that applicable. Felt like other things could have been focused on instead, and we could have taken the time that we used to focus on some of the things that we don't see in the video to expand on some of the things that we do know, like the main character's relationship with her family, with her dad, which was really enjoyable to read about, rather than reading about these relationships that weren't actually in the video at all in the first place and weren't mentioned in the book other than when they began. If that makes sense. It's hard to kind of explain if you haven't read it, and I don't want to spoil what is added into this book, but it just felt like some of it was a bit unnecessary and didn't really need to be there, and we could have used that time to focus on more hard-hitting and I think more applicable conversations and situations, like Coley's relationship with her parents. So yeah, it was interesting one to read. I'm glad we read it. I still gave it 3.5 stars. I still enjoyed it, but it didn't blow me away in the way that I wanted it to. The next one we buddy read was A Single Thread of Moonlight by Laura Wood, which we both absolutely adored. This one's a historical romance. Laura Wood writes historical books that have romance subplots. So it's a historical book. It's set in London. It's set in 1899, and it's following Iris Gray, who ran away from home 7 years ago, and she disappeared into the foggy streets of London. Now she's a seamstress, and somebody comes into the shop to ask for a dress and has a proposition for Iris, and this proposition kind of takes her back into society and even takes her back into the house she used to live in. This was fascinating. I think once me and Courtney start reading a Laura Wood book, we're different people. We love the balls in here, we love the dresses, we love the elegance of it all. I just feel like Laura Wood has this really enveloping, compelling way of writing that just makes you want to be in these pages, and I really enjoyed this. It didn't feel like it was as long as it was. It's like 500 pages long. This one was just really lovely to read. It didn't blow me away quite as much as Under a Dancing Star, which is still my favourite Laura Wood book and was definitely a 5-star read. This one was 4.5 stars for me. Did still really love it, and I liked the romance in here too, and I like that they're not completely the focus of the story. It's definitely a historical, usually with an element of mystery and with the romance as well. It's a great combination. I did really love this. The next one I picked up was Agricorn Cove by Kay O'Neill. This is by the same author and illustrator of the Tea Dragon Society, which you can probably tell from the illustrations if you have read those books, which are absolutely adorable, and this one was no different. This one is just so cute. It's so short, it's like 90 pages long, so I read it very quickly, and the illustrations and the colour palette are just absolutely so pretty, and this is such a comfort read for me. The same with the Tea Dragon Society, which I feel like I will reread many times in my life because they are so cute and so comforting. This one is following Lana, who is with her dad, and she returns to their seaside hometown to help clear the sea of to help clear the debris from a big storm. And it's all about kind of looking after the ocean, and she comes across a colony of acricorns, which you can see she's got one in a jar. They are these little creatures here, and it's just so cute, and they need to learn how to coexist with the sea. It's just beautiful. It also has some information in the back about coral reefs and damage to coral reefs, and it's just beautiful. It's just so lovely. Like, I have to rate this 5 stars. It's just so cute. It's so comforting. I love the art style. I'm so happy to have this on my shelf, and I will read anything Kay O'Neill writes because they're so talented and I love their illustrations. The next one I read was Rhubarb Lemonade by Oscar Kroon, which was translated from Swedish by A.A. Prime. This one was really interesting. It's following Vinga, who has gone to this island to spend the summer with her grandpa, and she's kind of left home to be there with her grandpa, and there's not really many people on the island. She hangs out a lot with her grandpa, she's very close with him, and they go to the pub every Wednesday. But then Ruth turns up, who's the same age of her. She's a girl. They're very opposite, but they spend a lot of time together, and for the first time Vinga tastes the delicious feeling of somebody liking you back, and is kind of discovering maybe being more than a friend with Ruth. This one came across really interestingly. I was talking about it last night on a vlog that you will see fairly soon, and I just found it really hard to try and explain this because I feel like I don't know if it's the translation, or I don't know if it's how it was originally written, or if it was how it was intended, but it didn't feel grounded at all, whereas I wanted to feel like I was there on the island with these girls, and I could feel the sun shining down, and I could really feel the atmosphere. It just felt very much like I was floating on the top of everything and everything was happening just below. Never felt like I was quite on the same level or really involved in the story at all. It just felt very passive to me, and I think that was probably my biggest criticism of it. I don't know if that is more, it comes across in a different way in Swedish culture or even in the original writing. I don't know if it's because it's been translated into English, or if it's just, I don't know, maybe it's just how the original story was written. It was still a very quick and easy read that I did enjoy. I liked it. I just wanted to feel like I was more there with these girls in this story. I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. The next one I read is Next of Kin by Hannah Bonham Young, and this was another one I buddy read with Courtney, and we both really enjoyed this book in a way that we didn't really expect to. I think Courtney was drawn to this one because she kept seeing the cover everywhere and it's absolutely beautiful. So is the other book, which is Next to You, which I would also like to read. And this one is following Chloe, who learns that her birth mother is unexpectedly having another child, and her birth mother is somebody she hasn't really been in contact with for a long time, and she was brought up in an adopted family, and she ends up taking on the responsibility of this child, so her younger sibling that her birth mother is now having. But she fails to pass the child protection services kind of evaluation for financial, like a financial evaluation that they do, because she's got a sole income and she's a freelancer, so she ends up being kind of teamed up with somebody who's struggling for housing because she's got extra space in her flat, and that is Warren, who is a mechanic, and he has custody of his younger brother Luke, who is deaf and is 15 years old. And it's actually, I really like that aspect of the book, and I felt like it was dealt with really well. There is constant kind of use of sign language in here, which was really interesting to read about. And it was really, really enjoyable. I actually didn't think I'd enjoy I didn't think either me or Courtney would enjoy this so much, considering the amount of discussion of children there is in this book. But actually it was handled really well, and the romance was just really enjoyable to read, and I think that's what we enjoyed most about this book. This is, in the heart of it, it's a romance, but also has some really interesting conversations and some really heartwarming situations in here too. And although it was a little cringy at times, it was still really enjoyable, so I rated this one 4 out of 5 stars. We then picked up Sheets by Brenna Thumler, and this one is another graphic novel including some ghosties, and this one is just absolutely stunning. Like, I'm just gonna flick through some of these pages for you just so you can see how utterly beautiful this art style is. This is just stunning, and it's one that me and Courtney have had our eye on for like years, not really knowing what this is about, and I think we both went into this book not really knowing what it was about, but really enjoying it. It was so pretty. It's following Marjorie, I think she's called. Yeah, Marjorie, who is 13 years old, and she's running her family's like laundromat. I think her mother has passed away, and she's ended up kind of looking after this family's laundromat, and also she then ends up being kind of visited by Wendell, who is this ghost who is like a sheet, because in this world ghosts kind of turn into sheets when they die. And it's also kind of following this dual kind of narrative between the ghosts and the real world. It's really, really just a nice story. It's so cute. It's very cool. Like, I really liked the way this was told between the main kind of story and these parts, which were the ghosts parts. I just thought it was really nice how they were involved in the story, and it was just really well done. The drawings were brilliant. The amount of dialogue to the amount of illustrations was really nice as well. That feels like a weird thing to say, but it just felt like a nice balance, and it was easy to follow the story, which I think is sometimes hard to do. So I really enjoyed that. There was a lot to love about this book. Definitely will be continuing with this series. I'm reading the second one, which is Delicates, and I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars as well. Then last but not least, we have Maybe in Another Life by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which was brilliant. I love this book so much. It was so compelling and exactly what I wanted from this book. It was just brilliant. Honestly, this is a new favourite, and I feel like after reading Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo and this, I love Taylor Jenkins Reid now. I wasn't a big fan of Daisy Jones and the Six when I read it, but it's been a long time since I read it, and I feel like maybe I should give it another go at some point. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. This is following a woman called Hannah who's 29, and she's kind of travelled around for years. She's lived in different places, had different jobs, and she's moving back to LA for a fresh start with the help of her best friend Gabby. On the night that she goes back to LA, they throw her this kind of party in this bar, and from that point on we follow 2 different timelines. One timeline Hannah makes one decision, and the other timeline Hannah makes another decision. I had no idea how this would work in a book, but it's absolutely brilliant, and the idea of this dual like alternate reality perspective parallel universe type situation was so well handled and absolutely blew me away, and it was just so lovely and also so emotional. I definitely teared up in places. I just thought this was brilliantly handled, brilliantly written. As always, Taylor Jenkins Reid has really impressed me again, and this is definitely a new favourite, so I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. I thought it was brilliant. So there we go, that is all of the books I read in June, all the 15 books I read. I hope you've enjoyed this wrap up. Let me know if you've read any that I've mentioned and have any favourites here, and I will see you in another video. Bye.